So this is really all about defining product strategy.
Yep.
Kind of starting there. We talked about this last time a little bit. Many of the people we talk to are diving right into trying to define solutions too early. I'm guilty of this. It's probably the engineer in me that wants to start figuring out what the solution is and how to build it. That's my reflex. But you've taught me to make sure that I'm super clear on the problem. So this is up front. We've just had a workshop where we're kind of getting all the background material, and we're headed into the problem space. We refer to it as understand and frame. Start to unpack that for us. Where do we go next?
Sure. So, really what we're trying to do, on one level is jump in and understand the domain. We're coming to it as product experts, but not necessarily deeply understanding the domain and from a business or a user experience standpoint. So, we talked a little bit before about the discovery workshop, and that's a great place where we come together and we kind of take an initial survey of the landscape in terms of the user needs and what the business outcomes are that you're really needing to hit, who the stakeholders are, what does the market look like, but where we come out of that workshop is a sense of kind of where the gaps are. Then hey, maybe we don't understand as much about users as we thought we did. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what other tools they're using. We don't know what their experience is like when they're using our product or a competing product. So one of the first things we do is we kind of triage the scenario in terms of risk, and then we start diving into these pockets based off risk priority. So, for example, user interviews. Typically, one of the first things that we do is we go out and we'll set up an early set of usually a small number of qualitative interviews. So when we say qualitative, it's not, we're not taking measures, we're not counting numbers. We're going in and we're unpacking. Essentially, what we want to unpack in a user interview is understanding what their current reality is. Like, how do you, when you're trying to do X, tell me about what it is that you do. Like, how do you go about doing that? Where do you start? Where do you begin? And we get them to start unpacking that journey that they're going through. What goes well in that process? What does not go well? What are the workarounds that they're using? Like, I use the software to do, A, B, and C, but then when I need to schedule a meeting, I got to go out into my email and I got to go into my calendar tool and I got to maybe make a phone call. And so we start to map that out. The other thing that's important there are emotional aspects and sometimes social aspects too. And that'll come out in the interview, that if those usually don't come out when you're talking to subject matter experts. It's like we want to get to the core, person that's using the product and say, how do you feel at this point when things go wrong, or as you're starting to do a certain task, like, how do you feel? Like, what's the critical thing that you're trying to get past? That gives us a much more rounded understanding of, when we talk about great user experience, a lot of what the teams are trying to do is anticipate where the user needs to go next. And often that's not really known, and that comes from that deeper understanding. So in a similar way, though, that's going to tell us about users. So we use user interviews. When we need to understand stakeholders and we need to understand the business, usually the workshop is more about alignment and trying to understand where the end goals are. But we often need to circle back and talk to a VP of sales or a director of customer support or a head of somebody who's heading up like regulatory controls for something, and understand kind of really what's driving the business from their perspective. What does success look like for them, and how can we make sure that the product fills the kind of hits the right targets for them.